The Certainty Principle. Introduction.
The Certainty Principle by David Light. I am David Light. Quote, I was 100% certain I would not fall off, and that certainty is what kept me from falling off. Unquote. 2015, Alex Honnold. Alex Honnold, by the way, is the climber who was central to the story Free Solo, the movie Free Solo, which was made about four or 5 years ago. Amazing movie if you get a chance to watch it. Disclaimer. I am unqualified and my principles won't work for you. Those are my particular principles won't work for you, but you can formulate your own if you follow the guidance of the book. Nothing I've written below will necessarily make you rich or beautiful or popular or famous. Nothing in my education or experience distinguishes or qualifies me to give any advice whatsoever in this regard, and in fact, probably just the opposite. My only qualification is that I've abandoned the fear of confronting the naked truth about human certainty and how I can sustain it. The brain divides. Division is the root of uncertainty. There is nothing certain or uncertain in the universe, except that the brain makes it so. Therefore, nothing is impossible. The brain is a biochemical data collecting device, evolved over aeons, for actioning, that is, converting data into action. Fundamentally for survival. The brain digests data to extract decisions and actions just like the stomach digests and sorts nutrients for physical survival. At least that's how it should work. As we will see, the brain's primordial motive is binary decision-making, either sustenance or starvation. The brain, though, which is nearly all data where all data is processed, divides and decides. Modern human survival has evolved beyond mere physical survival to become dominated by identity survival. And that is to say that we don't have to worry much about where we're going to get something to drink or if we're going to be warm at night or what we're going to eat. So a different kind of survival has sort of taken the place of that primordial, and that survival focuses on self or your own identity. And there's where the trouble starts. The brain tends to go to extremes to preserve and protect identity, even though, as we will see, identity is a complete illusion. The evolved state of division and decision is the source of all human uncertainty and suffering. Eliminating this mindset of uncertainty is its own reward. Certainty is the undivided equilibrium state. It is the freedom from allowing uncertainty to dictate what I manifest in life. It is the comfortable feeling of being, quote, at home in my own skin, unquote. Certainty is my anchor set in my bedrock, embedded in my earth, spinning in my universe, unbounded by a limitless horizon, the time and scope and limits of my brain's decisions and actions and incomes. When I was a little kid, there was no future. My horizon was mostly what I was going to do the next day. A couple of weeks to build and race my own DIY go-kart down the hill behind our house was about as good as my horizon got. Scope and time expanded a little as I got older. But as I did, the confidence and resilient optimism that comes from a brain undivided succumbed to an attachment to vanity and outcome dependence. The certainty principle is about retraining my brain to be certain, sort of like it was when I was a kid. Certainty is the supremacy of control independent of external conditions. Certainty focuses on duty, the work of my authentic accountability, while minimizing distractions. Cracking the code on a simple, workable formula for building and maintaining certainty was my challenge. There are methods available that seem complex and difficult, relying mainly on systems of faith and belief. These don't work for me. I wanted to understand the science of certainty, the mechanics based on fundamentals, based on knowledge rather than hope. I found this problem so interesting and important that I chose it as my duty, my mandate. As shown below, learning to limit my choices and actions to my mandate is the pillar of the TCP approach. Quote, as every divided kingdom fails, so every mind divided confounds and saps itself, unquote. Leonardo da Vinci, circa 1520. If the reader thinks the payoff of certainty is unclear or perhaps threatening, then read no further. What follows will appear as sacrilegious to some as it is sublime for others, mainly because of the certainty principle's few assumptions made. One is that personal accountability for choice and action is absolute. As Pascal's story below illustrates, literally, I am what I am are my choices of action. Notice I say choice and action, not result. That's because outcomes of actions, to a greater or lesser degree, rely on a variety of independent influences beyond my control. On December 6, 1941, my father was preparing to move to Puerto Rico to manage a sugar plantation and become an artist. By the next day, he was preparing for war. Quote, the best laid plans of mice and men, gang aft and agly, often go wrong. Robert Burns, Kilmarnock edition, To a Mouse, 1786. Outcomes are fundamentally unreliable, but my incomes, my individual commitments to the outcome equation, are entirely reliable. Reliance on outcomes beyond the data they provide diminish certainty. My reliance on incomes, my production, increases certainty. Misery is the result of depending on outcomes. To avoid misery, I limit my exposure to outcome attachment while embracing my incomes, the net result of the application of my natural talents and skills. The outcomes of actions I'm poor at executing will always be poor. This is the remedy TCP provides. Reliance on outcomes is a reliable source of misery, fundamentally fear and regret. Reliance on incomes is a reliable source of certainty, the harmony of optimism about those actions confidently within my control. It is easy to be optimistic when I learn to value the quality of my incomes as paramount. My income is the net production of my primary work on earth, my mandate, and it must be measured and increased. Whatever measures of achievement my mandate I choose, my goal is growth. My metric can be quality, quantity, financial compensation, all three, or some other. Mindful measurement creates certainty, even if I am seldom completely satisfied with the result. Quote, I have offended God and mankind because my work didn't reach the quality it should have, unquote. Leonardo da Vinci via Melzi, 1519. That said, da Vinci didn't mind displaying the Mona Lisa for the public to see. He ended up loving the painting so much he never sold it. Despite its imperfections, TCP tells us to try, and keep trying for excellence. The most important quality is the power of execution. Quote, a good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week, unquote. George Patton, 1947. There is always occasional distraction, but I do not waste time playing at things. Income, direction, and magnitude are the vector of achievement. In its wake is the entire value of my time on earth, the performance of my mandate. I don't make honey, and bees don't write books about certainty. My mandated work creates value as the honeybee's work creates honey. Likewise, the importance of my contribution is paramount as viewed subjectively. Though aspiration and competitiveness to achieve better and greater goals is only human, assessment of my personal best through measurement, avoiding attachment to external comparisons, is the path to mastery, and mastering value creation based on my individual mandate. Absent identification with either the mastery per se or attachment to any particular outcome is the power of the value created. The bee, as far as I have observed, does not gloat over his honey work. Should his honeycomb be destroyed by storm, he begins rebuilding it because his mandate is building and repairing the hive. Reading the notes of Leonardo da Vinci yields little self-reflective commentary. He focused his vast intellect on the perfect execution of his incomes. Such focus on incomes may be for either virtuous or afflictive purposes. Mastering virtuous incomes serves value creation. Da Vinci's work, Salvator Mundi, stunned the art world with its uncanny beauty, eventually fetching nearly $500 million for his efforts. Mastering afflictive incomes serves value destruction. Adolf Hitler's mastery was the root of the conflict, resulting in nearly 75 million deaths in World War II. TCP helps me distinguish between the two. Certainty alleviates accountability to my incomes, elevates accountability of my incomes to the top, and rationalizes everything else. My brain is that irascible data processing organ responsible for figuring out the difference. There are forces beyond my brain's meager capacity, or maybe anyone's brain, to understand. The brain has massive limitations. Just as there are physical limitations on sensory data, seeing, hearing, etc., there are processing limitations that are both intellectual, IQ, and systemic. The brain operates on Boolean logic. See Boole, 1854. What can be reasoned is limited because cognitive capacity is very finite. For example, God may help or hinder me, who knows? And I put God in quotes here. I relegate all such non-cognitive to chance and condition. Religion, magic crystals, aliens, or the logos are beyond me, therefore conditional. I don't deny the existence of reason-defying influences. Quite the contrary, I know they exist. But TCP is a practical operating manual, not a philosophical work. TCP's purpose is to train the brain to cut a hard line between actionable priorities and the superfluous, particularly the latter. Programming my brain to excel at such choices is the key to TCP and to my subjective success. At 10, I was free, and certainty came naturally. Concerns about who I was or what others thought of me disappeared with a chunk of double bubble bubblegum. Alternately, I played at being Davy Crockett or drag racer Big Don Big Daddy Garlitz. When my buddies showed up on Saturdays to shoot targets or build a go-kart, I never gave a serious thought to myself. As I grew up, identity kicked in hard, and I became a slave to vanity. That's when the trouble started. First time I drove my cart down the mountain behind my house and crashed it into a bloody wreck. As I lay dazed and bleeding and broken, looking up at my buddies, my first thought was not, what an idiot. I obviously have no business building go-karts. Instead, it was, God, I hope my mother doesn't find out about this. Followed quickly by, I think it needs brakes. Outcomes, like go-kart wrecks, were not something I spent a lot of time fearing or regretting. They were data points, like needs brakes, signaling design improvements. Unfortunately, by the age of 14, the discovery of girls changed all that. Outcomes came to dominate my thinking and my emotions, often with a crippling effect. Outcomes are only important for the data they provide. When asked why he climbed Mount Everest, Sir James Mallory, 1923, is famous because it was there, unquote, represents manifest certainty. To the multitudes before him, attaining the summit of the world's highest mountain had no reality, or at most was a remote abstraction. To Mallory, it was real enough to compel the actions required for getting there. That Mallory's Mount Everest outcome was ultimately fatal does not diminish the importance of his 3 early attempts to the eyes of fellow mountaineers. In fact, it elevates him, particularly for the route-finding discoveries made by the pair. One might say that Mallory and his partner Andrew Irvine reached their own high peak of certainty through their dogged commitment to climbing the then perilously unexplored summit. As with the discovery of black holes, both literally and figuratively, Finkelstein, 1958, the most interesting scientific studies result with a conspicuous lack of data discovery. Finkelstein began pursuing an esoteric quantum physics problem, promising no great fame or notoriety, but it led him to the discovery of black holes. Certainty is intuitive this way. The nagging dread that data is missing is a signal to the commitment to finding it. Mandates are discovered by paying attention to voids in subjectively meaningful data. What that really means is pursue what you wonder and are troubled about. Pursue what's interesting and complex to you. The important path to discovery is the important path to discovery in any field. Certainty exists in great part by virtue of the commitment to the path of data discovery, and to hell with the outcome. Important statement. Certainty exists in great part by virtue of the commitment to a path of data discovery, and to hell with the outcome. Lacking outcome independence, the prospect of such commitments can be fearfully debilitating. Mallory certainly understood the risks of the climb on Everest, especially after the first 2 attempts. He made the decision to demote potentially dangerous outcomes and promote his mandate, for which he paid with his life. I had to decide that my understanding certainty was worth the work. Certainty was the goal of my individual expedition, and it turned out to be that TCP provided a route-finding formula. It is the same way an alpinist might adapt to altitude by repeated exposure to even higher and more dangerous topography. My elevation to certainty was only possible by habituating myself to repeated exposure over the abyss of uncertainty. Quote, I've always been about incremental progress. I mean, it's funny because I've done maybe 35 first free solos. Really, when you lay them out, it's a long, long road, eventually culminating in El Cap. Alex Honnold. Alex Honnold Goes Undercover on the Internet, 2020. Certainty is becoming accustomed step by step to confronting fear of the unknown, specifically fear of conditions, those influences that are beyond my control. Mastering the skills that extend the limits of my control frees me from the infinite void of conditionals. Instead, I focus energy on doing a very few things well. Certainty training is so hard initially because clinging to conditions is so enticingly easy. After all, why master my life when it's so effortless to be a victim of it? But fear and regret always accompany dependency on externals, an unacceptable fate for me. Certainty is not being fearless. It is finally capitulation to the fatigue of allowing fear and uncertainty to be the driver of my decisions and actions. So though my individual path may not work for you, TCP is a compass that may be helpful on your path. The deep sense of place and purpose it provides will be with me forever, and if that sounds rather important, then perhaps the reader should read on.